Some archaeological discoveries have to be seen to be believed. The good thing about that is we're in a position to show them to you so you can believe them. We've assembled a collection of wonderful archaeological finds for you in this video. So sit back, relax, and we'll take you on a journey to the distant past. The Voynich Manuscript is a bizarre 15th century textbook in the archives of Yale University, full of illustrations but written in a language that nobody's ever been able to translate. Or have they? In June 2020, a German Egyptologist claimed to have finally broken the code. Rainer Hannig, who works at the Roma- und Palatinus Museum in Hildesheim, says the base language of the mysterious symbols in the text is Hebrew. The translation process is very slow. So slow, in fact, that he's still working on it. But he claims it's clear from the sentences he's translated so far that the Voynich Manuscript is a medical textbook. However, Hannig is far from the first person to claim a successful translation of the text since it first came to light in 1912, and his translations have already been rejected by other historians. It's commonly believed that the manuscript was once in the hands of the infamous astrologer John Dee. Some people think he might even have authored the script. If a full translation is ever achieved, it might hopefully explain why the information was encoded in the first place. If it's a medical textbook, why the need for secrecy? The only thing that scientists and archaeologists can agree upon about Peru's Sacaihuaman complex in Peru is that it exists. It was probably built by the Inca people, and it was definitely built in a time that we consider to be pre-industrial, by which we mean that the people who created it didn't have access to any sophisticated building tools. In other words, this entire site was made by hand, and given its level of sophistication, that ought to have been impossible. The enormous blocks that make up the three main walls at the site are so perfectly interlocked that it's impossible to slide even a single sheet of paper between them. But there's no adhesive, binding agent, or mortar connecting them together. They were cut, balanced, and placed together with total structural accuracy, without the aid of a lathe, a spirit level, or anything else that we'd rely upon to achieve the feat in the modern age. No two stones at Sacaihuaman are alike. Each one of them appears to have been purpose-built to fit into its precise location. Even the conquering Spanish forces that eventually seized this location were too amazed by it to destroy it. Gobekli Tepe is already known and respected as the oldest religious structure in the world. The remains of the ancient temple are in southeastern Anatolia, Turkey, and are 11,500 years old. That makes them 6,000 years older than Stonehenge in England. The site was mysterious enough even before researchers found new hidden patterns buried beneath the surface in May 2020. It seems that the limestone pillars and round stone structures were planned as a single structure, rather than being added to over the centuries. The people who built Gobekli Tepe are commonly believed to have been hunter-gatherers, but the degree of planning evident at the site necessitates a high degree of sophistication. If the pillars and stones were planned as a single project, they followed a coherent and complicated geometric pattern. Even a modern architect would be impressed by the scale of the plans. It's always been thought that the use of geometry and floor planning didn't begin until 10,000 years ago at the earliest, but the evidence of Gobekli Tepe says otherwise. We might never get to the bottom of the questions of who created this anomalous structure, or why. A collection of fantastic bronze artifacts was found inside a Zhou Dynasty tomb in Baoji City in Shanxi Province, China, in December 2017. The treasure haul includes a ritual tureen, soup bowls, and wine vessels, all of which were probably used as part of a funeral ritual when the tomb was sealed. The tomb, which is known simply as Tomb M4, is around 3,100 years old. The ritual tureen is the most remarkable object in the collection, as it's adorned with carvings of dragons and birds, and finished with no fewer than 192 spikes. Some of the artifacts seem out of place with what we know of the area at the time. It's been speculated that they might have been spoils of war, buried with the unidentified individual within the tomb as a mark of respect. The names of several Shang clans are inscribed on several of the vessels inside the tomb, but the tomb is almost certainly that of a high-ranking member of the Chao people. If these artifacts had been looted from the Shang, the person in the tomb might have been a military officer who commanded some of those raids. Speaking of discoveries in Shanxi province, let's talk about the Terracotta Warriors. They're the most famous archaeological discoveries ever made in China, but it might surprise you to hear that there are so many of them that they're still being found today. In February 2022, archaeologists found a whole 20 of them close to the entrance of the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. The sculptures, all of which are 2,200 years old, were found in Pit 1 of the site and are in excellent condition. The newly discovered soldiers include a general, an officer, and a section of infantry complete with chariots. As amazing as all this is, it's probably still just the tip of the iceberg. Archaeologists think there might be as many as 6,000 more figures waiting to be found. Amazingly, Chinese historical texts don't mention the Terracotta Army or give any indication of why it was created. Based on the complexity of the tomb and the amount of work it would have taken to create it, experts believe it would have taken more than 30 years to finish the job, and that's based on the assumption that a workforce of 700,000 people was involved. Stonehenge, the stone circle in Wiltshire, England, is one of Europe's most mysterious ancient monuments. Academics still debate how and why it was built today, and they're even more confused by its lesser-known neighbor, Woodhenge. The existence of this wooden circle wasn't noticed until it was seen and photographed from above in 1925. These early aerial photographs revealed the presence of holes in the ground, arranged in a similar formation to the slabs that make up Stonehenge. Archaeologist Maud Cunnington tasked herself with investigating these holes and found traces of wooden posts in each of them. Cunnington identified 6 distinct rings, each of which featured a ditch and a mound at its center. Were these wooden rings, created about 4,400 years ago, practice runs for the more difficult task of creating Stonehenge? If so, it shows that Neolithic people in England had a much greater capability for design and planning than any historian has ever given them credit for. In more recent times, the ancient holes have been filled with stone columns to give tourists a better impression of how the site would originally have appeared, but greater visibility hasn't helped experts get any closer to solving the mystery. The site of Sutton Who in England is, with the possible exception of Stonehenge, the most famous archaeological hotspot in the country. It's where the world-famous Sutton Who helmet was found. According to a study that was published in January 2021, it was also likely the very last large-scale Anglo-Saxon boat burial of its kind. The site of Sutton Hill is around 1,500 years old and was discovered in 1939. The enormous burial mound contained a whole ship, along with a lavish set of grave goods unlike anything that British archaeologists had come across before. It was considered such a significant discovery that it forced historians to second-guess everything they thought they knew about Britain in the medieval era. Just 100 years after the Sutton Hoo burial event, though, the concept of burial mounds and grave goods in England had been forgotten. This is thought to be largely down to the emergence of English royal families, which sucked up the land and resources and took wealth away from regional leaders and nobles. Christianity also began to take hold in the 8th century, which encouraged less ostentatious burials. Whoever the Anglo-Saxon king who was buried at Sutton Hoo was, he may well have been the last of his kind. Given that the archaeological site of Pompeii in Italy is world famous and has been known about for more than 2 centuries, it's astonishing that we're still making new discoveries there. We suppose that goes to show how thick the layers of volcanic ash and rock are, and how slow and laborious the process of sifting through it is. It's worth it though, because every now and then someone will find something like this 4-wheeled processional chariot. It was found during the excavation of a villa known as Civita Juliana, and is almost completely intact. In fact, it's in such astonishingly good condition that its original floral decorations can still be seen, as can its tin and bronze decals. The large size of the chariot suggests that it may have had a special ceremonial use, rather than being the type that people used for everyday public transport. It's even possible that it might be a pallidum, a carriage reserved exclusively for priestesses and high-ranking ladies. If so, it was probably used for marriages in exactly the same way that some modern couples still hire a carriage for their wedding day today. The history of humankind in the Americas is poorly understood. Every time we think we're getting close to the start of the tale, something is found that pushes the date of human arrival back even further. Here's a discovery that does exactly that. It's a set of footprints that were found in White Sands National Park, New Mexico in September 2021. And the footprints are about 23,000 years old. This proves beyond all doubt that there were already humans in the Americas at the time of the last glacial maximum. Most of the prints appear to belong to teenagers and young children, with only a few adults present. Prior to this discovery, most archaeologists believed that the earliest date that could be given for humans arriving in this part of the world was 16,000 years ago. This blows that idea out of the water. Knowing that these people were here gives us a new problem, though. Now we have to work out who they were and where they came from. People didn't suddenly spawn right in the middle of North America, so they must have gotten here from somewhere else. There's a cave in Spain that contains some of the most ancient artwork in Europe. You can go and see it if you like, but there are plenty of people who think you shouldn't. The Altamira cave paintings are held in such high regard that the caves have been nicknamed the Sistine Chapel of the Paleolithic era, but damage is caused to the ancient paintings every time groups of humans come near them. That's why many experts believe they ought to be off limits for the sake of preservation. The caverns, which are in the country's Cantabria region, have been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1985. The paintings that adorn their walls and ceilings range in age between 20,000 and 14,000 years. It's thought that different groups of humans lived inside the caves between those times. Most of the art depicts animals local to the area, like bison and bulls, although there are also human figures and a few abstract shapes. Science tells us that every time groups of visitors have been allowed in to see the paintings firsthand, their very presence, right down to perspiration and breathing, damages the delicate artwork. Nevertheless, the money generated by tourism dictates that the visits continue. We've already said that Pompeii is the richest archaeological site in the world. So, let's prove it. In November 2021, Pompeii gave up one of its most fascinating finds in years when what's thought to be slave quarters were found in such good condition that it's almost like they were frozen in time when Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79. We have no doubt that it would have been unpleasant to live in these quarters, but there are indications that Roman slaves, or at least the Roman slaves in Pompeii, were kept in better conditions than you might imagine. They had beds, chamber pots, amphorae, and ceramic pitchers in their rooms. But given that at least 3 people probably lived in this room, they would have been extremely cramped. The room measures just 50 square feet. Also in the room was a shaft from a chariot, which implies that vehicle repairs were part of the enslaved people's job description. Horrifically, archaeologists think that one of the beds might have belonged to a child. The room, which is beneath the Civita Juliana villa the chariot we discussed earlier was found, is currently being preserved. We still don't know how the Great Pyramid of Giza was built, but this discovery from October 2018 might have pointed us in the right direction. It's an enormous ramp, and it was created about 4,500 years ago at the same time as the pyramid. Egyptologists are fairly sure that the ramp was used to pull alabaster stones uphill. What's left of the rampway was found at the site of an ancient quarry in Hatnub, which is in Egypt's eastern desert. Aside from the central ramp, experts have identified a pair of staircases accompanied by numerous post holes. It's feasible that the ancient pyramid builders placed stone blocks on wooden sledges and attached them to ropes wrapped around posts erected in the holes. Dragging the stones uphill this way would have been a slow and painful process for the people doing the pulling, but it would have worked. This type of structure has never been found anywhere else in Egypt, so the fact that it's here and it fits the timeline strongly suggests that there's a connection between the ramp and the pyramid. Now all we have to do is work out how the workers got the stones off the ramp and up to the top of the pyramid. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon!